Hey, it's been a while. A while. I did warn you guys that, yeah, I don't have much to review. So, first video put out in January, next one put out in September. So, this channel has enough to put out. I mean, if Diane, has problems getting products, then me, a student from Kenya, oh boy. Anyway, I did promise that I would review the things that I do own, and one of the things I acquired last year was this, the Moondrop Blessing 2, and this is the version that was slightly retuned by very, very popular big baby boy, Baby Crin, or Crinacle. For those of you who don't know Crinacle, he's basically the internet's, I guess, audio god, with his graphs that he shares for free on his website, and just his general YouTube tomfoolery, which we all appreciate. Now, over the years, he has made several collaborations, and they've either been very hot or very cold. And I feel the most lukewarm, maybe unappreciated, is this, the Blessing to Dusk. Now, as you can tell, it's not really Blessing to Dusky. I've changed the tips, changed the cable. This is not how it comes stock. And if you want to know how it comes stock, just go to shenzhenaudio.com. You'll definitely find it there. You can read everything about it. I'll just get into the nitty-gritty because I'm trying not to put out whole movies for you. Now, going by the title, yeah, it's insane. It's insane. You'll tell me $1,000 is my next, the kilo buck, bus stop is the next thing after this. You'd be like, that's ridiculous. But I feel, at least with what I've tested, what I've read, honestly, I hope at the end of this video you can understand why I feel that is the case. Yeah. Now, to get into this video, I feel this IEM is one of the most polarizing things I've ever listened to. And I think many people online, would agree. We've all had, a fair share of criticisms and appreciation for this IEM. My personal experience, it's been quite a journey. And first things first, when I got them stock, I was very, very confused, and I actually did not like them at all. I thought the standard tips were very dog, and these are the replacement tips from Asla Sedna, the Elastics. And in here I have the medium-sized tips that came standard with this IEM. They're okay, they're nothing spectacular. Quite a rather large bowl. But my problem with them is that they are so bright and also extremely uncomfortable. These are not things that you would wear for long periods of time. These elastics not only made them bearable, made the fit work, serviceable for me, but also tamed certain aspects of the sound signature, which we will get into later. But I would highly recommend changing the tips on these. If you are a big earhole boy like me, then these would work. And on these currently I believe these are mediums. You can get smaller ones. Whatever works for you works for you. We don't all hear the same, we don't have the same ears, so get that sorted. It took me so long to understand how to wear these as a result. Every other reviewer is talking about having deep insertion, but I couldn't get that, and I felt the deeper they got into my ear hole, the worse they sounded. Yeah. So I just had them lying just right. Of course, naturally you'd have them inserted well, but I had this part lying quite serviceably on, that region of the ear. I really wish I had a more technical term to describe it, but as long as I had this part lying rather flat against my ear, I think everything sounded well. This didn't necessarily have to be fully inserted and feel like I had someone shoving a phallic object into my brain. Yeah, they felt good, and I felt they sounded ideal. Now, in terms of sources, I don't think sources necessarily affect this IEM. However, it would be great to understand that you would want something that is maybe neutral, perhaps not bright as well, and also not muddy, because I feel the mid-range section of this IEM is so bland that it kind of exposes what it is you're using to listen, or the music you are listening to. Now, the cable itself is, as you can see, a hot audio cable. The standard cable, I really wanted to throw in the bin for a while, and I just said, you know what, let me just keep them. I put them on my blonde BLO ones. It's nice, serviceable, but terrible. And I also got this so that I could use the balance. This is balance 2.5 with the IEM BU2. And I realized, yeah, balance has its benefits, which I appreciate. And I think with that, I think it's healthy if we just got into describing the sound signature on its own via looking at the graph. For those of you who don't necessarily understand graphs, I feel like this may help you understand this hobby and may actually save you a lot of money. Understanding what it is that you like may actually spare you a lot of time. Some of us really suffered. Now, the blessing to Dusk is unique. It has a very, very healthy sub bass, going all the way rather cleanly, into sub, 250, 300 kilohertz, and it doesn't affect the mids. The mids are hilariously plain, and as a result, you may feel like this lacks engagement or energy. Energy being a bit of bass in your mids, or a little bit of that treble spiciness in your upper mids. There's none of that. It's healthy. Because of the sub bass elevation gives tracks a rather grand presentation. Everything sounds very, if Hans Zimmer was in your head type of feel. Now, don't take it too far with that analogy, but it just sounds very cavernous. Everything feels like it has a certain amount of depth. It's big, but also non-obtrusive. I find myself, with how this is tuned, almost using them for reading, which is odd. That can never happen. IEMs should engage you, and when you find one that you can use for reading, then I know that it's a problem, but it speaks for itself. The area that I think many people might struggle with is the treble, especially if you're using the standard tips, which again, dog doo-doo, and definitely changing to something like the elastics which tame it. I feel like you'd really, really, really appreciate it, especially that 6K region. The 6K is very, very spicy sometimes, so this helps. So as a result, you have an IEM that is very dead, very plain, can be kind of like a palette cleanser. A sub bass that is fun, and treble that is spicy. So you basically have everything you would want in the IEM. I think can give you a decent listening experience for a very, very, very decent price. And that price, I feel, holds up until you're reaching the kilobuck area. Let me get into talking about this when it comes to music. I feel like maybe this will help, and on this channel I feel like this is how you will understand your product better. I'll start with electronic. On Europa by Gaspard Auger. Gaspard is one of two members of Justice, and the album that he put out, it's okay. It's okay. It's as if, you know, Justice put out a Justice album, but just has Gaspard's name on it. This IEM did layering phenomenally. It starts with this creaking from left to right, and it's followed by very schwanky, bourgeois, mids and drums. However, because of how very average the mid-bass impact is, and I think it's because of the driver quality and just the mid area, it's very average. The kick doesn't have engagement, but when the grand feeling of the track comes up, especially with the pianos, the sub bass kind of saves this record. Vocals kick in. It's this angelic, sensation, but it's nice and grand, but it almost feels soulless. It feels, I guess the right word would be dry. Macro dynamics are super decent, but the micro are okay. You can pick out a specific element of the track, let's say at 1 o'clock, and it's shiny, it's bright because the treble is spicy, but it's nothing well defined. And another track I would say that also really points this out is the Data Demon. Just generally, that entire album by Lapalux is phenomenal. But the synths and the saxes in this, they're what bring a very grand vibe to this video, this track. However, just the dry mid-range really makes jazz elements really suffer. But the sub bass brings a very haunting vibe to this track, so you feel extremely engaged. There's a break in this track that will send you to heaven. Now, moving on to maybe I'll say orchestral soundtrack stuff. The Tenet soundtrack. Come on. I feel like this is the test bench for any, grand scale type of reproduction with any headphone, any IEM. And on Freeport, my goodness, Freeport, it blows my mind how perfect that track is. Yeah, at the start there are these tiny synth swirls, then we go into cracking, banging mid bass. Yeah, everyone knows that scene when Batman is basically looking at the artwork and he's scoping it out. When those mid bass thuds start hitting, it doesn't kill you, and you really want it to. You want those 808s to kill you, but it doesn't hit. And of course the track is supposed to be very wide, but because of how this works with soundstage, everything is still very much in your head. Very much in this sphere right inside your head, and everything's happening here and here, but nothing outside. Moving on to more orchestral stuff. Floating points. Oh my goodness, you will have to forgive me. It's called Movement 6. The track is spectacular. It's a swelling of just every element. It feels like a constant crescendo. Forgive me, it isn't, of course. But yeah, Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders, and the London Symphony Orchestra. The work they did here is phenomenal. And the dry aspects of this IEM make the saxophone a bit unengaging. And that is the real star of that piece. Layering is good. Macro dynamics, as I said, are great because everything comes swelling up, because of the sub bass. Cello, the xylophone. But things like the violin really suffer. And high octaves of the xylophone are also, they feel like they're struggling, to find themselves, to define themselves, to give themselves an identity in this very grand piece. The panning, as I said, is phenomenal because layering on this IEM is decent. But yeah, I guess thank you sub bass for making the crescendo, especially towards the end, spectacular. Rap is, I feel this is where this, is very divisive. On tracks like Real Nigga, the track is so chaotic and the sub bass on the 808 hits so hard, but Peggy's voice in this sounds very sharp and it goes back to that 6K region. Macro dynamics are still incredible. At points a certain just sudden screams or sudden sounds like the machine gun going off, or a guitar strum, those all sound well. And on N95 by Kendrick, which is I think one of, if not his best banger, Kendrick's voice now. In the last track, Peggy sounded raspy and sharp, but here, because Kendrick, I don't know how his voice is mixed, the mid-range is so dead, so Kendrick just sounds very dead. Sounds very dry, and it can be slightly annoying, but the sub bass comes again in to save the day to make the track just extremely lively. The treble keeps things spicy, all of the synths going on, it really keeps things moving, and it sounds like a big wave. It truly, the sub bass makes this, the synths genuinely come in with a big wave, and then the hi-hats, because they're slightly spicy, you get kind of everything that you need, nothing more. And that's why I call it like a test bench, I'll move on to pop very quickly. Next Charlie by Charlie XCX, The Queen, and unfortunately the last good album Charlie put out, Don't Hate Me. But Next Charlie is such a beautiful track and one of the most beautiful openers, I think, of all time. Full stop. Sub bass again gives this very lively track so much contrast, presenting the synths in such a divine way. And then Charlie's or the howling and the angelic and the angel, the background building, it truly makes you feel like I'm ascending. Going back to the whole wave aspect, sub bass gives this a wave with a mid bass, having no identity, and the treble being kind of spicy but also very quiet in this track at certain points. It truly feels like an ascension. I felt though that, again, I think going back to certain limitations of this IEM, there's a lack of refinement. Just maybe like, if I was to give it like a score in terms of refinement, I call it 70. You can tell that like in this track, hi-hats, snares, sometimes they can sound woolly. In this track, because this album was built up by PC Music, and I think Danielle Hall, you'd have to correct me, but I know this was very much a PC Music collaboration with Charlie. They have all these wonky snares, wonky hi-hats, And here, they sound woolly. I know they sound sharp, it goes back to the Sufi snares, for those of you who know Sufi, rest in peace. Just very quickly, I think maybe just to touch on this album, because I feel like it's necessary. The Doom OST, and I feel like I'll always bring this up because I feel that album is so perfect. But Olivia's Doom is so haunting. I feel like this is where the sub bass comes to save the day again. The grand aspects of the song, it not being very clean, the way it's done, it just makes you feel, that element of terror. However, again, I will say that 30% lack of refinement kind of makes things sound rather compressed and uninteresting. The mids make things muted and flashy. When they're speaking, it's not, you're following, it's not gripping. Guitars and atmosphere, they're all okay. Yeah. So, as just a general assessment, I feel like this, just to go back to the argument at the beginning, I feel like this is just right for you to, yes, want to upgrade, but upgrading from this is not significant or worthwhile. I feel like, yes, if you have the money, do what you can. No one is going to stop you from spending your money. But with what I have tried and sent back, because I want to make it valuable, I don't have the opportunity of owning something and then hopefully reselling it here in Kenya, because I don't think people would appreciate it as much as I do. Many tests with software's volume, SA6, variations, and Oracle. Those are the IEMs that I tried immediately. All of them gave me a better experience, yes, but it wasn't significantly better than this. You'd just be having different tastes of this, because all of them have a small flaw that holds it back. And I felt whenever I came back to this, because of how it's tuned, it kind of reset me and kind of made me appreciate everything else. It made me appreciate well-defined, dynamic drivers. These are nothing special. These are mass and dynamic. And some would argue that these are terribly, terribly tuned. But I think it's an 11mm driver in that are so gripping and so fun. Bass texture is divine. And it makes me appreciate, okay, this is what I need in a dynamic driver. Can I get it in the variations? Yes, I will. Is it worth the $200? Maybe. The extra, $200 over this? Maybe it is. But I'll just be having this. It's just like a 20% increment, which isn't worthwhile. Honestly, even with the blondes here, the dynamic driver in this isn't super clean. It has great texture. Details are not special, not in any way. In fact, it sounds like I'm listening to cotton in a dustbin, in the middle of the ocean. But these are fun to listen to as a result. And when I listen to this, it makes me appreciate everything I own that much more. I genuinely believe upgrading from this, you need to be shooting big. Save your money. Wait for the right time to strike when their deals are on. And I think you will come back to this and really appreciate it for what it is. Yes, it requires a bit of work. A new cable, tips to get it sounding right. But I think you will be a lot happier with putting your money into, a decent DAP, decent amp if you have other headphones, and then when you want to get the big boys, I think you'll appreciate this, that this guy took you to the stop and let you off. That sounds very sick, but you get my meaning. So I hope you guys are able to love what you listen to, and I feel like you will enjoy your experience with these. You will. And it's because it'll give you just enough until you can get what you deserve. So, I've been Sam, and hopefully the next video will not be, in 3 years. So, I hope you love what you're listening to, guys, and I'll see you next time. Peace.